Hello, my dear students of class 11. Welcome you all to psychology class. In my previous class, I was discussing on unit 4 that was learning, and then I have left some few topics that we will be discussing in this class. The last time I was discussing on the laws of learning, the nature of learning, what is learning, and I also discussed on the trial and error theory of learning, and at the same time on the imitation theory of learning. So today we'll be continuing with 3 theories as well in this particular class, and the first theory that I'll be discussing will be on the classical conditioning. When it comes to classical conditioning, the classical conditioning theory was propounded by Ivan P. Pavlov. Ivan P. Pavlov was a Russian psychologist, and then he said that the classical conditioning involves a involuntary response and stimulus. It means that it involves an involuntary response and stimulus. Basically, it means that the response, he said that a response can be conditioned by using a conditioned stimulus. So in order to prove his theory, he did an experiment on a hungry dog. He did an experiment on a hungry dog. It's basically he kept a dog hungry for some weeks, or he did not feed the dog for a long period of time, and then the dog was tied to a chain, and then he was kept in a place. And when the dog was presented with food, the dog started to salivate. So he was starting to salivate, and it is a very natural habit for a dog to salivate when they are hungry, and at the same time when they see food, they get hungry and they used to salivate. So what happened was he presented the dog with a bell. So the first thing, the food was the unconditioned stimulus. Unconditioned stimulus, it means that there is no control over it. And at the same time, when the dog saw the food, he started to salivate. And then the salivate being a natural response, it is known as unconditioned response. So it was not conditioned. But at the same time, in order to change things up, what Ivan P. Pavlov did is that he rang a bell, okay? And when he rang the bell, ringing the bell or the bell became a conditioned stimulus. Conditioned stimulus means like conditioning it or taking control over it. And at the same time, the food was an unconditioned stimulus, and likewise, when the dog saw the food, the dog started to salivate. So basically, the bell, after ringing the bell only, Ivan P. Pavlov gave the food to the dog, and then once the dog saw the food, the dog started to salivate. So that became the unconditioned response. So this continued for over a period of time, and then several trials were made again, and then 2-3 experiments were done, and then several trials were, the same kind of response was, the same kind of sequence was given on a very long period of time, and at the same time several trials were made. So when Ivan P. Pavlov did an experiment again in order to test whether the dog will salivate after hearing the sound of the bell. So what he did was that he rang the bell, but Ivan P. Pavlov did not give any food to the dog, but instead of not getting the food also, or by not looking at the food also, the dog started to salivate. And why did the dog salivate? Is basically because the bell was attached to the food. Because once the bell was rang, the food was given, and it was done for a long period of time, and then it was done for several trials were also being implemented. That's why the dog started to associate the sound of the bell with the food. That's why when the dog heard the sound of the bell, the dog started to salivate. So basically, it means that conditioned stimulus has associated with a conditioned response. And in this case, the bell became the conditioned stimulus, and then the salivate became the conditioned response. So this theory was done by Ivan P. Pavlov in order to prove his theory that conditioning is helpful in order to welcome a conditioned response. So this theory was based on Ivan P. Pavlov, and it is known as the classical conditioning theory. The next theory that I'll be discussing will be on the operant conditioning theory of learning. So on operant conditioning theory of learning, this is basically different from classical conditioning. From classical conditioning is also an associative learning, but at the same time that is based on stimulus-response bond. But when it comes to operant conditioning is basically based on the reinforcement or punishment. Reinforcement as in sense of rewards, or in punishment in sense of punishing the individual for bad behaviors. So this operant conditioning was propounded by B.F. Skinner, and B.F. Skinner is known as the father of operant conditioning. So operant conditioning is a type of associative learning process through which the strength of a behavior is modified by reinforcement or punishment. It basically means that a behavior can be modified either by giving rewards or by giving punishment. And then rewards and punishment in order to change a behavior of an individual. So that is basically known as the operant conditioning. So before we go into the experiment given by B.F. Skinner, I will tell you in this class about the types of reinforcement. When it comes to types of reinforcement, the first one is the positive reinforcement. So when it comes to positive reinforcement, the individual, if an individual shows good behavior and is sincere to his work, or if a child is doing his or her homeworks, and then if the child listens to the parents and if the child listens to the siblings, then the positive reinforcement can be implemented, as in giving toys to the child, or as in giving sweets, or sometimes giving a gift card, or taking them to a trip. So that can be known as positive reinforcement, because when they show good behaviors and when they showcase good behaviors towards their friends or towards their neighbors, then in order to complement those behaviors and in order to encourage those kind of behaviors to the child, positive reinforcement can be implemented. And positive reinforcement, like I've said, it can be either in terms of giving rewards, of sending gifts, or giving a toy, or taking the child out to a trip. So that can be known as the positive reinforcement. And when it comes to negative reinforcement, negative reinforcement is basically different from punishment. It is not related to punishment, but negative reinforcement is basically known as staying away from the unpleasant behavior, or avoiding the unpleasant behavior. Avoiding the unpleasant behavior is basically they not participating in the unpleasant behavior. That is known as negative reinforcement. And one of the examples for negative reinforcement is basically during winter season. We wear warm clothes, or we wear jackets, or we wear overcoats. Why? Because we want to avoid the coldness of the winter season. That's why we wear warm clothes, and that's why we stay near the heater or near the fireplace in order to keep us warm. So that is basically avoiding the cold. So negative reinforcement is somehow like avoiding the unpleasant behavior, or avoiding the bad situation in order not to indulge in that behavior. So that is known as a negative reinforcement. After the reinforcement, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, the other one is punishment. How punishment is helpful in order to change the bad behavior of a child or of an individual. For an example, if a child shows bad behaviors and does not listen to the parents, then what the parents can do, what punishment can they give? The punishment can be given like letting them stay, or making them grounded at home for like 1 week, 2 weeks. This kind of punishment is basically seen in the Western countries. And when it comes to Asia is basically different. Punishment can be in terms of giving 1, 2 sticks to the child, or it can be in terms of a bit aggressive behavior that can be shown by the parents. So the punishment differs from the Western culture and from the Asian culture. So, but that also basically comes under the punishment, under operant conditioning. So those are the two types of. So those are the two forms of operant conditioning that B.F. Skinner gave, was reinforcement and punishment. The experiment done by B.F. Skinner in order to show the operant conditioning, or how it works, was that he did an experiment on a hungry rat. So one at a time it was done. And then the hungry rat was kept at a chamber. And then when the hungry cat was kept at the chamber, okay, a lever was also placed. A lever is basically a small type of this kind of things, and there was a button. And then when the rat will press on the lever, food will drop on the chamber. But in order to do it, so the rat has to find out how to do it. Okay, all right. So after several try, or we call it as the exploratory mode of searching. So basically, when the exploratory mode was on, and then the rat was searching, how to do it, the rat was able to do it at a last minute, or after a long period of time. When on the first trial, the rat was able to do it all after lots of mistakes, lots of trials, and then the rat was able to get the food. And on the second time, also these trials were continued. This experiment was continued over a period of time. Over a period of time, it means that second time it was tried, third time it was tried, and then the rat was able to do it at a lesser amount of time on the second trial, and on the third trial, the cat was also able to do it on much lesser time than it took on the first and the second trial. And on the fourth, fifth, it kept on continuing until and unless the rat was able to get the food instantly when the lever was dropped on the chamber. And then the rat was able to do it after several trials, and the food was the conditioning became the reinforcement became the food for the rat to condition the behavior, like how to press the lever. So it became the food became the reward for the behavior shown by the rat. So this is one of the examples done by B.F. Skinner in order to prove the operant conditioning of learning. The last theory that we will be discussing on the topics of learning will be the insightful method of learning. When it comes to insightful method of learning, it is basically based on the whole perception, like how we see the whole situation in our environment and how we take that into our perception and make use of the whole situation or of what is around in our surroundings. So insightful method of learning was basically propounded, and then it was made famous by Wolfgang Kohler, Kurt Kofka, and Max Wertheimer. And then these psychologists are from the Gestalt school of thought. Gestalt school of thought is basically focusing on the wholeness. They see the situation at a whole level, not as a tiny bit, but as a whole level of elements. So basically, Gestalt school of thought is focusing on the basis that perception, when we perceive things, we do not perceive things as tiny bits, but we perceive things or situations on a whole level, as a wholesome. Okay, so based on that, Kohler conducted an experiment on chimpanzees. Okay, on chimpanzee, he conducted an experiment on a chimpanzee, and then the chimpanzee name was Sultan. He gave the name of the chimpanzee as Sultan. Okay, and then the Sultan, the chimpanzee, was kept at a cage. So he was kept at a cage, and a banana was hanged on the cage, above the cage, okay, above the ceiling of the cage. So, and there were also boxes lying around, and there were some sticks that was there on the cage. Now, before using the sticks and the boxes, the chimpanzee tried to jump and then try to get the banana, but the chimpanzee was not able to do it. So because of the height, because of the difference that it was in the height, the chimpanzee tried to jump but was not able to get it. So what did the chimpanzee did was that he looked around the environment and he saw the boxes and the stick. And then the chimpanzee made use of the situation. By using the situation, the chimpanzee went ahead and then he arranged the boxes, and he took the stick and then he climbed on the boxes, and using the stick, he got the banana. So it shows that when we see the situation at a whole level, we are able to finish our work. We are able to get our works done. So that was how it was proved that looking or perceiving the situation at a whole level can get our work done. So this experiment was done by Kohler based on the whole perception level of behavior of thinking. Okay, so this was based on the Gestalt school of thought, and then basically this theory was done by Kohler, and he conducted the experiment on the chimpanzee named Sultan. The next topic that I'll be discussing will be on the transfer of learning. When it comes to transfer of learning, it means that whatever we have learned and then whatever we have learned from our past experiences, and when we use the learning of our past experiences in our new situation, in our present situation, in order to come out with positive outcomes or positive results, it means that, or known as, transfer of learning. Transfer of learning is basically means that when your past experiences or when your past learning has been effective in your present situation, when you are learning something new, and then when you are learning something new and then the past experiences helps you in your new learning, is known as the transfer of learning. And there are three types of transfer of learning. The first one is positive transfer of learning. Positive transfer of learning, it means that when your past experiences has helped you in your present experiences, and it has given you positive feedbacks or positive outcomes, then it is known as the positive transfer of learning. The next one is the negative transfer of learning. Negative transfer of learning, it basically means that when your past experiences has not helped in your present situation or has not brought out any positive outcomes or results, then it is known as the negative transfer of learning. And the zero transfer of learning is basically simple. When your past experiences does not help you or does not benefit you at the same time, is known as the zero transfer of learning. So zero transfer of learning is basically in the middle, neutral side. Okay, so positive transfer of learning, negative transfer of learning, and zero transfer of learning are the three types that comes under transfer of learning. The last topic that we will be discussing on our unit 4, that is the learning, will be the last topic, factors affecting learning. What are the factors that affects our learning, or what are the factors that leads to an impact on our approach to learning? Is basically, the first one is the psychological factors. Psychological factors, under psychological factors, you will find the sound mental health. What does it mean? What does sound mental health helps you to understand? Because when we have a proper mental balance or proper mental abilities, then we are able to learn quickly. At the same time, we are also able to keep in check with our emotions. When we keep in check with our emotions, it helps in learning, okay? It helps in positive learning. The second one is proper motivation. Proper motivation is basically getting the proper motivation from our friends, or when we, as an individual, we motivate ourselves to learn. We can wake up early in the morning and we can tell ourselves that, yes, today I'm going to learn a new thing. In that way, you can motivate yourself, and in that way, it can lead you to learn different kinds of things in your life. So that is proper motivation that will come under psychological factors. The next factor is the physiological factor. Physiological factor is basically referring to the physical abilities that we have. The first one is physical health. When we are free of sickness, when our health condition is fine, then there is a high chances or high probability that we are going to learn a lot of things. But when we are sick, when our health is not good, then at the same time we are not able to learn anything. So maintaining a good physical health is very important for learning. At the same time, keeping a balanced diet. When you are keeping a balanced diet, when you eat healthy food, it helps your body to maintain a fit body, and at the same time a healthy body, and it also leads to learning. And then the third one will be the environmental factor. When it comes to environmental factor, proper learning conditions. Proper learning conditions, it means that the environment should be good. The place that you are studying, or the place where you are living and staying, should be good, and it should be clean. At the same time, it should be free of noises, no loud noises. Because when you learn, you are able to learn it in a very peaceful manner. And when you are learning in a very peaceful manner, or in a very peaceful place, there are high chances that you are able to learn it quickly. So these are the topics that will come under factors affecting learning. And then this was the last topic on our class, that is intelligence. So in order to brief you guys, in this class we have discussed on the insightful learning or learning of theory. That was the one theory, and then we have discussed on the classical and operant conditioning theory, and then we have discussed on transfer of learning. At the same time, the last topic was on factors affecting learning. Thank you.